education is underfunded and underserved in many ways. At the same time, we spend a ton of money on education in really poor ways, right? Because we don't have the outcomes that match. And the reason for that is the way that we fund education is literally like, oh, you have 10,000 students, you get $30 million. If you have 5,000 students, you get $15 million. It's literally children in chairs. The reason that that's messed up and why we are in like a budget crisis right now is if we are not having children, we're seeing that there is a decline in the birth rate.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Definitely.
And so now we've got an entire system that's been built on a certain amount of students, and those students are just not being born. And so there's less kids matriculating into the system.
Yeah.
And so in order to right size, that means that we have to make cuts.
Yo, what up? It's your boy Rubino.
And this DJ in the building.
And you listening to the UpNUp Podcast.
Yeah.
Wait, what are we doing?
I don't know, just listen.
Yes. Welcome.
What it do?
Ladies and gentlemen, you're tuning to the UpNUp Podcast on the UpNUp Network. I'm your host, Rubino.
And I'm DJ man.
What's up, man?
What's going on?
You sound a little more alive than yesterday. I ain't gonna front.
Hey, man, I was alive. Yeah,
it was a
I
Monday.
was alive yesterday, too.
I'm joking. I be looking for your energy to start the show. I need it.
You got to,
You know I need it, bro.
It's out here raining and stuff.
Man.
You got to turn it up a little bit,
You know what I'm saying? But no, I'm feeling blessed. You know, I feel like I should just start every episode saying that, right?
Yeah.
Feeling blessed, feeling good. For those of you tuning in, welcome to the show. As I stated, this is the UpNUp Podcast. This is the podcast where we're focused on cultivating culture.
Yes, sir.
Right? We do that by providing amazing stories of individuals, groups, movements, right? The hustlers, the shakers, people who are breaking down barriers, right? Taking up space in places where we need to be taking up space, right? And not only doing it for all of us who are currently here, but for the next generation, right?
Yes, sir.
Putting it down right now. I'm super excited. Definitely want to shout out the family members.
Always.
I think I forgot to shout them out last episode. I ain't gonna front. So I'm going to give you all a major shout out right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Shout out to the family members, the consistent supporters, viewers, listeners. We appreciate y'all. And if this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the family, right?
Yep.
Man, you know how we rock, man. I'm excited to get things going. You know, we always bring someone up here who has a compelling story to tell. I feel like everybody's story is unique. Their journey is unique. And today's guest is a brother who I would say is definitely walking on a path that involves truly stepping in and stepping up. To make things better for the youth of today and the next generation. He's definitely a true culture cultivator who's keeping everything he's doing on the up and up, right? To go a little more in depth, he has been making his mark and is currently going to continue making his mark in the space of education as he serves on the City of Seattle School Board, holding the title of president across District 7. Alongside with leading as president, he's also an educator himself, just truly doing the work. And when I say the work, it's the work, for real.
Yeah.
He's doing the work needed to be done to support and reshape the way our education system needs to be elevated, right?
Yep.
Not only elevated, but innovated too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, whether it's narrowing opportunity gaps, advocating for young students of color who've been underserved for far too long, he's definitely using his platform and his influence to make the changes that are needed. He's dialed in, and I think all of us should definitely hop on that call. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So without further ado, let's just get straight to him, man. Our guest is none other than the man with the plan himself, Brandon Hersey. Can we get a round? How you doing, brother?
Hey, man, I'm blessed and highly favored. I'm just happy to be here. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Good energy in the room.
Hey, perfect energy, man.
Yeah.
Perfect energy. It's a whole vibe in here.
Come on, man.
Yeah, man.
It's good to have you, bro. I always say it's long overdue, but right on time.
Indeed.
You know what I mean? Definitely.
Yeah.
So I don't know how familiar you are with the show, but we start every episode with the quote of the day.
Ooh, let's go.
Oh, see. Well, we excited.
Yeah,
Okay,
man. I'm excited.
Okay,
excited.
yeah. So quote of the day, obviously, for those who know, Brother Erm.
Yes,
He's the man of the quotes.
Yes,
what you got for
Before
us?
I drop the quote, hey, you don't miss on the intro. So let me just give you the flowers on that.
Thank you, bro.
Okay.
Thank you. You know what I say? Every great album needs a good intro.
Yes, sir.
Great
Indeed.
intro. So I try to do my best, man.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Man. Appreciate it.
So the quote of the day is, the best preparation for tomorrow is doing your best today.
That's very direct. I like that.
Yes, sir.
Who's that quote by?
Horace Jackson Brown Jr., who's a writer.
The best preparation for tomorrow
is doing your best today.
doing your best today.
Love that.
How you feel? How you feel about that one?
I mean, that one hits close because I'm a big proponent of if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. You feel me?
Yep.
I'm also an Eagle Scout. So the Boy Scout motto is be prepared. And I am a contingency planner. I like to think through problems and whatnot. So just being prepared and having your stuff together whenever you can, you know, is super important to me. So that hits real close to home. That's a good choice for sure.
Good one.
Yeah.
Good one. So Brandon, man, like, you know, like I said, this show, this platform is really about kind of amplifying people's stories and journeys, right? But before we get into your journey, I am curious, you know, I mean, summer's not over, right? It's not over. Like you said, August is one long Sunday, right? But with summer closely coming to a close and the school year right around the corner, like currently, what's your energy and mindset like these days?
Hey, man, I think that like there's such a unique experience, like interacting with the school system as an adult, because what a lot of folks don't talk about, though a lot of people see public education from the perspective of like going to school. So I spent 5 years teaching in Federal Way, and I've been out of the classroom for 2 years now. And so I'm working in labor in a different capacity, but I've had a lot of time to reflect on like, what is it like being in a school system and like being out of it, but still being in it. And what a lot of folks don't talk about is that a lot of teachers, especially for primary, when you spend all your time with the same kids every day, you go through like a little depression, like at the end of the school year, because I spend a ton of time with these kids, more waking hours than their parents during the year. You know what I'm saying? And so when you take all those relationships and they just end, right? And you've been building those over a year, it took me being out of that like tough cycle to actually look back and see, okay, what was my body doing? What was it trying to tell me? What was the shift? And now that I'm like kind of a little bit on the outside looking in, it's just like, I can feel it in my body. So like, I say all that to say, if you have teachers in your lives, if you have people who are in the school system in your lives, just reach out to them, see how they're doing. Because especially coming off the last couple of years of the pandemic, everything that we've had going on in Seattle and nationally, you know, that cycle has only been, I would say, compounded of like all the complexity and range of emotions. So, you know, that's how I'm going into it. I'm just trying to take care of the educators and the students around me as much as I can. So, you know, that's what I'm on.
Got it, bro.
Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective to look at it from. And I think when we become adults, if you're not in the education space, you kind of like, you're just so detached from it. You know what I mean? So I'm glad that you were able to share that.
Yeah.
No, definitely, man.
Definitely. So I just want to take it back, talk about your upbringing. Growing up, like what was that like for you?
Oh man. So I'm from Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Okay.
So if y'all know where New Orleans is, it's about 90 minutes east. So like if you're thinking about south, think a little bit more south, and that's where I'm from.
Okay.
So I remember growing up, and I had a really quintessential childhood. You know, my dad had a good job. My mom was a teacher. My grandma was a teacher. My sister is a principal, was a principal at the high school where we went and where my mom taught, and now just accepted like a head principal role at a middle school. So she's still there. So education, and so like so many of my aunts and uncles are all up and through special education, sports education, just down south. Education is kind of like the cornerstone of like what the experience is. And so for me growing up as a teacher's kid, it was a cool experience. I had like a very quintessential 90s like Sandlot childhood. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, growing up in a place like Mississippi, with all of the things that come around being a black man growing up in the South, especially a light-skinned black man growing up in the South, one of the things that, you know, I went through is I never developed an accent. And so not only am I like light-skinned now, right? I also don't sound like I'm from Mississippi. I remember I would be going through the lunch line and the lunch ladies would be like, baby, where you from? And I'd be like, I'm from here. So like, no, where your people from? Woman, here. Like, I don't know what you want me to tell you. I was born at Forest General.
Wow.
I know, right? And so, and a lot of that just came from like, you know, watching the stuff I like to watch on TV. You know, that's how a lot of us develop our vernacular. But growing up in that environment and having, you know, an educator for a parent, definitely looking back on it has informed a lot of how I show up in the world and what's important to me, you know?
Connects.
Yeah,
Definitely
bro.
connects.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah, because that's actually a common topic we do talk about with guests is how a lot of the things that we were doing when we were kids or younger play a major role in who we're going to become. We probably just don't know it at the time. So if you could kind of take us through a little bit what that was like, having those influences of educators in your life, because I do feel like there is a flip side to that where you see like the kid whose dad is like an army general or whatever, and he's like, I don't want to be that, so I'm gonna be everything opposite of that. But in your case, it seems as though you were more like moved towards that. Like, talk about going through that a little bit.
Yeah, and I had a really roundabout path, right? So like, was raised in Mississippi, and so when I was 12, my mom passed away from this like rare form of cancer. I have 2 older sisters, as I talked about earlier, one still in Mississippi, the other's in Atlanta. And so for my developmental years, I was raised in a single Black father household. You know what I'm saying? And it was so wild because it's like in the education system in Mississippi, we talk a lot about, specifically here in Seattle, the importance of having Black teachers, right? Yeah. And the impact that has on students of color, or at least teachers that look like them in some capacity. It was kind of weird for me to not have a Black teacher growing up. So like, that's a conversation that when I stepped in here, it was like, oh, wow, like the rest of the country don't really know what's going on out here like that. You know what I'm saying?
Real talk.
The reason that it had such an impact on me is because like, for a lot of my not colleagues, for a lot of my brothers, a lot of my friends and stuff in Mississippi, like losing a parent, that would have been game, you know? But because I had my dad, my family, support system, but more importantly, all the educators that knew my mama that wrapped their arms around me and my dad, quite frankly, and made sure that I was still on top of my game, you know, I was straight, right? And to this day, like, I still have like folks calling me about what an inspirational like impact my mom had on them as a high schoolers, right? And at this time, I must have been like 6 or 7. You know what I'm saying? Still calling me to this day, hit me up on Facebook saying like, your mama had such an impact on me, da 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 da. And it's like, I talk to my ancestors a lot, especially when I'm stressed, right? I try to think about like, you know, if my ancestors could do X, I can definitely do Y. You feel me?
Yep.
And like, that is just a connection that I have with her and a connection that I have with community that is like become really special to me. And a lot of that is just that energy of caring for a community and like that genuine deep care. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, for me, I've moved as far away from my community as I possibly could, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I knew that regardless of where we landed, my fiance is from the area. I wanted to lean in, you know, heart open, full force, because community is what saved my life.
Yeah.
And it instilled in me a real drive and a real hunger to provide even just a fraction of that experience for somebody else.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Incredibly like important to me.
That makes sense. You know, you said something that stuck out to me where having people who care, like having people who care, people who are just like wrapping their arms around you. Because when I'm thinking about like the young youth who are lost or kind of like just need guidance, a lot of it stems from neglect or just like really having nobody being on them at all, like giving them any attention. So I think attention and having people actually care is going to drive you towards where you want to go. You know what I mean? So I'm just glad you put that out there because I think that's an important message.
Hey man, it's critical.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I guess what were like your interests like growing up? Like what were you into?
I mean, I was into a lot of stuff, man. Like I was an artist, right? Before I actually like started engaging with like more studious approaches, right? I grew up in the area, I grew up in the era of Toonami. Dragon Ball Z had just dropped, so like I'm crushing loose leaf paper. You know what I'm saying? Just trying to get my pen right. But growing up, my interests were like really like I like to build stuff. I love Legos. I love that kind of shit. Oh, excuse me. I love that kind of stuff.
Free speech.
Yeah. Anything that I can engage with creatively. And like one of the things that you mentioned that I really want to come back to later is like the need to elevate and specifically innovate in education. Innovation, we make it out to be something that is just not, right? Like if you look at the definition of innovation, it's just connecting two things that weren't connected before, right? It's that simple.
Wow.
And so as I look back on like things that I found interesting in my life, it's been making connections, whether that be through like plastic bricks or through people or through concepts for children in terms of math and reading, right?
Yeah.
Or even in a policy role now, connecting community with like bureaucracy, connecting like ideas with like action. That's kind of what I've always been interested in, you know?
Yeah.
And that's led me to a lot of different places, you know what I'm saying? So I'm excited to dive more into it.
Yeah. No, that's real. Well, speaking of diving into it, I definitely want to just kind of dive into the space of education currently, you know, and I actually did read in an interview that you did, and I quote, you stated, in the classroom, I have learned the profound effect that leadership and policy founded in equity can have on students, and the students in our district need curriculum that reflects their culture, identity, and lived experiences.
Come on.
Now, it sounds very like straightforward when you hear it, but I think there's a lot to unpack there. So from your perspective, like how do you see that as a challenge from your role in trying to like execute that in today's current education system? Because it's needed.
It's critical, man.
Yeah.
And I think that like so I have a very unique perspective of being like from the South, living here. I've spent some time working in DC as well. And so I've seen a lot of different markets and like the ways that specifically Black folks engage with systems and are oppressed by systems in those markets are also very different, but they are also familiar at the same time. And so what that means for me is that like when I'm thinking about the policy that I make for Seattle as one of 7, I know that that's going to influence policy that happens in King County, right? Because a lot of other districts that don't have the same support or might not necessarily live as in a progressive area as we do are facing some very real challenges that are very akin to what I would typically, you know, expect to find in Mississippi, right? And so we really have to take the national conversation into account because a lot of liberal policy that we see implemented, $15 minimum wage, so many other things that are becoming, you know, just now conversations that people are having, you know, to the east of us, all started here. And so every decision that the school district makes, that the city makes, that the government makes, blah, 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 has impacts that are far reaching beyond Seattle and beyond King County because of our influence, right? And so when I'm having those conversations, I not only need to, you know, go hard for the kids in Seattle, but also understand the impacts that, you know, that brings for everybody else.
Yeah.
When we talk about culturally competent curriculum, we are having the exact opposite conversation that they are currently having in Florida, where they are trying to basically convince or reject the fact that slavery was an oppressive system that tortured, you know, Black folks and brown folks for 400 years, right? Whereas the conversation that we're having here is like, this curriculum does not go far enough in terms, or far at all in any way, shape, or form in terms of honoring and celebrating the diversity of culture that we have, specifically in the part of the city where I live, the South End, where we're all on top of each other. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so as we try to like thread that needle, one of the things that I really appreciated about what you said is like, it just sounds straightforward. I think a lot of politicians like try to implant jargon and like all of this, that, and the other in what they share in terms of their communication. And like, because I know that the impact of what we say here in Seattle is so far reaching, I try to make it as plain as possible. One of the biggest things I learned in the Obama administration was put everything as bluntly and as clearly as you can so that everybody has access to it, regardless of where they might live, what their education level might be, their background, X, Y, and Z. And so I think that until, you know, we start looking and taking an opportunity to have these conversations more plainly, we don't create as much access as we could for everybody, and it's a missed opportunity for us.
No, definitely.
Man, yeah, no, that's dope. I mean, it goes back to you saying like connecting things. Because it's like, you know, half of the time, like we might read something and be like, what does that mean?
Right.
But, like, you know, the fact that you kind of put it bluntly, it's like, okay, you know, it's kind of dope that like, a lot of people could have access to that and be like, okay, yep, I could just. This is my opinion on it. Or
I
like,
appreciate
you
that,
know
man.
What I mean?
It's a considerate thing to do too, because sometimes people use opportunities to like make things very complex to kind of like show, like it's kind of like a self-serving thing. Like let me show how much knowledge I have. So let me try to complex this, as opposed to like understanding. Man, I'm trying to serve, and if you're trying to serve, you got to know who you're talking to and how to communicate to them. So that's good.
That's exactly it. And I think a big part of what brought me to that understanding was my work in the classroom. Cause it's like, you have to ask yourself, like, what is your end goal? Is your end goal to market yourself, or is your end goal to build understanding of something that's critical and important? Right. And so from the perspective of a teacher, if I get up and I just say X, Y, and Z and don't nobody understand me, what I'm wasting your time, I'm wasting my time. Yeah. Like, the whole point of this is to, like you said, build access, make sure that people can understand what's going on, but more specifically, just open this stuff up, like, and make it fun, right? And one of the things that we say when we teach is, like, when we're teaching kids how to read, is like, you need to find a book that's fun to read and that's easy to read and that you can do by yourself. I want to provide a view into educational government, whatever the proper term for this space might be. That's fun, easy to understand, and that, like, you can leave saying, like, oh, okay, I get what's popping.
It's like, you got to create entry points.
That's it.
And it's like, however you get in, and then you'll know whether or not you want to stay there and you want to explore it, but you want to get people in. Just to kind of dive a little more into kind of just the work you do, and on that level that you're at now. We all know, everybody in this room can honestly say, like, change isn't a one man or woman show or job. It's a collective effort. There's a lot of collaboration that goes into it. So from your perspective, like, take us through what it's like to collaborate, communicate, and try to get on the same page with other decision makers. Because you're a decision maker, but there's also other decision makers. Like, what is that like? Because I think the average person just may look at you and see the title of president and be like, yo, make something happen. But, like, what is that like for you?
That's it, man. Man, bro, school board is wild. School board is absolutely wild, because it's like, you're on the outside of it and you're looking at it, it's like, oh, school board is like where all the decisions get made. That's not how it works at all. And so, like, let me back up a little bit. I think the first thing that I would say is that the people who at least I try to come into this role with, in terms of making sure that their voices are heard, are those in community. Like, when I first got into the role, I got to be, like, 100% honest. Like, it was a lot. It was a lot. I started around the same time as Gramai. And that was like 4 or 5 months before the pandemic hit, right? So it was where school board is already a steep learning curve. It was because we were all learning. We didn't know what was going on, right? And so I knew that the only way that I was going to be able to be successful in this role was being as open and as transparent with community as possible. And what that meant for me is, like, I'm gonna just cut out the middleman. I'm not going to go to community and say, like, I'm going to be your representative. I'm going to just bring you with me, right? Because it's like, me not being from here, and, like, let's be 100%, I'm going to keep it a buck. Like, y'all know the legacy Black Seattle community. Like, there's a very strong theory of change. And I was a nobody that nobody asked for, nobody sent, And I took that very seriously, in the sense to where it's like, okay, let me get out of the way and let me try to be as open so that community can use me as a conduit to achieve whatever the already existing theory of change was.
Gotcha.
That took a lot of, like, listening on my end. That took a lot of, like, really trying to build understanding, and I'm still learning, right? As we all should be. But I think what's critical there is that, like, my success is not only predicated by, like, everything that I bring to the role, exiting all of my hubris, but large part, if not more, I at least attribute to how community has accepted me and how community has, again, wrapped their arms around me, like my community did in Mississippi, lovingly and sternly. And at the same time, by building those relationships and building trust with one another, great things have been possible. We've been able to end isolation and restraint in the district. We have a student community workforce agreement. For example, the new Rainier Beach High School that's being built. Now, if you are a student of Seattle Public Schools, or a parent of a Seattle Public Schools student, or a community member, you get preferential treatment, not preferential treatment, but priority hiring on those projects. So, like, money that is going into those projects are going into the pockets of students and their families more directly. You know what I'm saying? That's amazing. Like, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Come on. And, like, now we're in a position to where we are, like, completely overhauling the way that we do business, because y'all know the Seattle School Board has been dysfunctional forever. And a lot of that has just been because we didn't have a framework in how we do our work. What is our job and what is the superintendent's job? So we've done a major overhaul on the way that we govern ourselves. So it's largely been because community has been very clear with what their demands are and what their expectations are. And I've been able to bring my policy expertise in partnership with the 6 other directors that represent the city to really, try to make, whatever this is better for our students. Right.
Yeah.
And that's really what we've been on in terms of, how we're looking at not only the present and where we've been, but where we want to head.
Yeah.
So,
definitely. I like that, bro.
Yeah.
So I know, Robbie, you were talking about this earlier, how, once we kind of grow out of being students, we feel a little detached from the school system or the education system, and I guess just in a whole. So I guess for the people who don't really know, like, how do they really get their voices heard? Like, do they have to show up to certain meetings? Do they, you know what I mean?
That's the best part. So one of the biggest things that the school board gets feedback on, mostly negative, but, feedback, is that we don't do community engagement well, right? And community engagement is a hard thing to do, right? It's not just holding a meeting at an elementary school and saying like, oh, here's a PowerPoint, da-da-da-da. It's actually having two-way communication, right? Because what a lot of folks will think is like, oh, like you can come to public comment, because that's what most people would tell you off rip, right? Oh, you can go sign up at this website and come have your 2 minutes. That's not engagement. That's one-way communication. That's somebody talking at me. Right. Or even if I post a video, like that is also one-way engagement, right? That's me talking at you. There's not like a real-time feedback loop opportunity. And so one of the things, we are actually just stood up a complete committee of the board, 3 board members, myself leading the committee and a couple of others, really tackling like, how does the board want to do community engagement, right? We've attributed a huge number of hours to this. And so what we've come up with is we started to backward plan, and like we now have a year-long calendar that shows like what is everything that's coming up that you need to care about, either as a board member, as a community member, as a staff person, right? All that information for the first time ever is in one place, and that will be available to the public. So anybody who's like, nervous about something or wants to get more information, they can know exactly when the opportunities will be. And we're scheduling community engagement sessions where we are more so in a two-way communication proactively instead of being in a reactive sense where something like, oh no, terrible X thing has happened at my school. I need to get this fixed. The board's voting on it like in a week. I'm going to get 20 people and show up and we're going to try to get this changed. That is a waste of taxpayer money. If we are in a position to where a board's mind can be changed after years have been put into a specific topic or initiative with a couple of wealthy parents at a school board meeting, that is a problem. That's a huge problem. But that is a problem that only exists because for decades, the school district has done an ass job of actually following up with people. So you're in a catch-22 that the only real solution from my vantage point is to stop being reactive and start being proactive. If I do all that I can to work with as many community groups and stakeholders that align not only with, our strategic plan, but like my district, my values, all that kind of stuff, then I really do genuinely think we'll cut down on a lot of like the spiciness that we see all the time. And I think that will trickle down to the board. I think that will trickle down from the boardroom to the classroom, which is super critical.
Which is the ultimate goal.
Absolutely.
It's
absolutely
like everything going on is to serve the students.
Has to be.
And thank you for breaking that down the way you did. I think that's going to be very beneficial for community members, parents, right?
I hope
those of us who need to know. I'm curious though, like, and I think this is an obvious thing, but I was even doing like some research on it just to kind of learn. But like, when funding, right? Like lack of proper funding for underserved schools, and we know what underserved means, but you get what I'm saying. Like, can you take us through like, what are some of the biggest obstacles that block said funding from making it to the schools that and we all know need it most? Obviously, it's very deeply rooted, right? And if you want to go as far back as decades and decades ago, we know kind of how things are structurally set up. But how would you kind of, I guess, describe that?
All right, I'm gonna take a little second. So there are, in my opinion, 2 frames of thought here. And Washington is really unique because Washington spends a ton of money on education. Ever since the McCleary lawsuit, where it has been upheld that public education and access to a free and appropriate public education is Washington's paramount duty. K-12 education makes up about 50% of our budget in the state. Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa.
And that 50% does not get the outcomes that we deserve for students. We rank like in the low 40s in terms of educational outcomes.
Wow.
So we're spending the most, right? But our outcomes don't match the amount that we're spending. So something's broken. And it's one of those situations where we've built this system up so big that, like, you know, at a certain point, it's just like, all right, we're just going to slap another, you know, layer of paint on there, right? And so many things can be true at the same time. If there is one lesson that I have learned from school board, it's that many things can be true at the same time. And some of those things often compete, but the world and the universe is crazy and you just got to figure out those problems. So what I mean by that is, yes, education is underfunded and underserved in many ways. At the same time, we spend a ton of money on education in really poor ways, right? Because we don't have the outcomes that match. And the reason for that is the way that we fund education is literally like, oh, you have 10,000 students, you get $30 million. If you have 5,000 students, you get $15 million. It's literally children in chairs. The reason that that's messed up and why we are in like a budget crisis right now at Seattle Public Schools, and a lot of districts, almost all districts across the country are feeling the same pain, is that really necessitates the fact that you have the same amount of children that are coming into the system year over year over year. And what we know as millennials is that we can barely afford to feed ourselves half the time, let alone a third or fourth or fifth human being. I have a question for you. In Seattle, there are 770,000 people in Seattle proper, right? Out of that, there are about 360, give or take, 1,000 households. Guess how many of those households have children?
40%, 50%?
I would probably say like 60.
You think 60%? So 40 or 50% of that, half of 360 would be like 180,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's half that. Only 64,000 households in Seattle Public Schools or in the Seattle city have children in them.
Wow.
Our median age is 35. And so we have a lot of folks who are accessing a really big portion of our city's resources, a lot of all this kind of stuff. And how we balance the opinions of folks who interact with our system, and how we build kind of an engagement model, so to say, with our community has to be different, because it's like we're not just communicating with parents and families. We have to be communicating with the entire city, right?
Yep.
So when we're talking about funding, and most of our folks being millennials, the reason that we have to get those folks engaged is because if we're not having children, we're seeing that there is a decline in the birth rate.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Definitely.
And so now we've got an entire system that's been built on a certain amount of students, and those students are just not being born. And so there's less kids matriculating into the system.
Yeah.
And so in order to right size, that means that we have to make cuts, you know?
Wow.
And so that's why the way that we fund schools by a per pupil model is so broken, because it depends on there being a consistent amount of students coming into the system on an annual basis.
Wow.
And the economic crisis that we're in has really changed that in a significant way.
Wow. See, the average person doesn't think things are connected, but everything's interconnected.
Has to be. Yeah,
Everything's
man.
interconnected.
It is.
And when you break it down like that, it makes sense why everybody should care.
Yeah, man.
You know what I mean?
Whether you have kids or not.
Exactly.
Whether you have kids or not. Yeah. And really, it's like, I do think people genuinely care. It's just that we as a system, Seattle Public Schools, don't know how to communicate with folks who are 35, right? We communicate with children, and then we communicate with parents. And there's a big middle. The vast majority of our city is in the middle, and we're not talking to those people at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it got to be based on what you're telling us, I feel like it has to be proactive from the community as well.
Yeah.
Like, I shouldn't wait till I have kids to try to make an impact on the education system. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We need folks, volunteers, teachers. Like, we need people just to come engage with us, see what's popping, see what's going on, let us figure out how we can work together on stuff, you know? And that's really what I think the heart of a lot of our leaderships are at this point, is like, how do we get folks engaged that might not necessarily directly engage with the system on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
this is an amazing conversation. And I
Yeah.
think, because I think there's a lot of people who matter in these situations. So obviously students matter.
Yep.
I do kind of want to touch on teachers, right?
Yo, my God, yes.
So it's funny. Shout out my boy Khalil.
Yeah.
He's out there in
Okay.
Atlanta. He's he's a teacher. I texted him. I was like, yo, I'm about to have the school board president. I need to know from a teacher's perspective, like what matters to you. So he sent me some stuff that he wanted to kind of just touch on, and it was
let's go.
Yo,
Thank you, Khalil. If you're watching, thank you for being a teacher, bro.
Yeah,
Seriously.
for sure.
My
Shout
nephew
out.
goes to school in Atlanta Public Schools, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he really just wanted to touch on kind of adequate resources for teachers to run their classrooms. Some of the things he talked about was how some teachers have to break their own pockets and make sacrifices to make things happen. And obviously, me being a student at one point, I would never have thought.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I thought they were good. Like I thought they had every, you know what I'm saying? Another thing he also said was like, so often teachers have to be everything for their students, whether it be mental health, providing mental health guidance and things of that nature. So like, let's just talk about teachers and how we can support them. And I think you can definitely share that with people.
Yeah, man. And so like, there are so many ways, and this is one of the things that I mean by like engaging people in community who might not necessarily have kids in this, because teachers need to be taken care of, right?
Yeah.
And I'm in a really tough spot because I am a teacher. I'm also a policymaker, and so like that puts me in a really challenging position because, again, many things can be true. Do I want to pay teachers as much as possible? Yes. Do we have the money to do that? No, right? I'm going to make that choice and like take it on to me to like, you know, try to figure out how do we thread that needle down the line. That's not an ideal means of governing, right? But we're in a crisis, and when you're in crisis, you got to do what you got to do to protect your people, right? And so all that being said, I think one of the things that I was thankful for, and this is by no means enough, but it's just one example of like how folks could engage with this idea of like how to support teachers, is before when I started teaching in Federal Way, we had an agreement where like we could get reimbursed for like a couple $100 of like classroom supplies. All right, cool. And you can also get like a refund on your taxes, cool. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, it's like $400, where anywhere, you know, a teacher could be spending from $500, $600, $1,000 on their classroom, because we're going to make ends meet.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it goes back to what I was talking about at the top of the podcast. It's like, these aren't just my students. These are like my kids. You know what I'm saying? That's why so many of us say like, these are my kids, right? And it's like, we understand the boundaries and things like that, but when you spend 6.5 hours a day, like if I know that like, you know, Jay doesn't have any pencils, Jay is not going to not have pencils. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Whether the district is going to provide it or not. If I know that Susie over here don't have enough to eat at lunch, or like doesn't eat the food at lunch because it's not healthy, or like, you know, they might have a specific diet, Susie is not going to not eat. You feel me? So like, there are just so many things. And I think this really bleeds into the other part of the conversation of so many hats that we wear. You know, that was one of the things that really led me to, quite frankly, burn out on education, because, you know, for the 5 years that I was in teaching in Federal Way, I was the only black man in my building, serving 540 mostly black and brown students who used to be Seattle residents, who got priced out into Federal Way to the Part 16 apartments, if you want to keep it a buck, because those are affordable, right? And so the school that I taught at went from being 180 white kids to like 450 black kids over the course of a summer, and grew to 540 kids by the time I left. You know what I'm saying? And you can imagine that happening in a year, me being the first black teacher there. I went around my first year, asked, you know, are y'all excited for Black History Month? Me being geeked, thinking like, you know, we're finna get in. They looked at me like I was crazy. They ain't never heard of it before. And so like, when we're talking about how do we support teachers, all the hats that we wear, for me in my classroom, I was like therapist, like bank account, like, you know, parent sometimes in many respects, in collaboration with their biological parents, you know what I'm saying? And that was the type of community that we built. And because their parents knew that I had their kids back fully, that like we could get to a place to where we had a familial relationship. I could be honest with them about like, you know, how things are going in the classroom. And that built trust for them to know that like, I'm going to get their kid to where they need to be, or as far as I could get them by the end of the year. That's exhausting. That's working 3, 4, 6, 7 jobs as one person. You know what I'm saying? And every year is different. Put that on top of trying to figure out how to do that at home.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
This is just at work.
This is just at work.
This is just at work.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And then the pandemic hits, and then like it just spirals from there. And so that's why I have such an affinity, and like why I'm trying to check on my teacher friends a little bit more is because there are folks who had been doing that for 5, 10, 20 years before that, lived through that, and are still trucking.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Check on your friends.
Yeah.
Check on your teachers in your life, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We just gotta take care of our educators, man.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot, right?
Empathy, man.
Empathy.
Empathy.
Man, the word of the month for me.
Come on,
Word of the
that's
month.
my word right there.
Man, empathy.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah,
That is
man.
it.
Definitely.
Mm.
'Cause, man, I mean, I was kind of seeing it like on social media when teachers had to take like extra jobs on top of all that you just explained. You know?
Oh,
and I'm
yeah,
just
man.
I'm like, man, like, how? It's kind of weird. You just sit there and you're just like, I can't believe this is happening, or like somebody's letting this happen that could have the means to kind of like support these teachers and support the whole system. You know what I mean? So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
we pay teachers like decently well in Washington. It's nowhere near enough.
yeah.
But like even for me starting out, right? And this was before we had some epic pay raises over the course of the past like few years, specifically in federal way.
Mhm.
When I first started teaching, I was making probably $48,000 a year, and that was taking a pay cut from my job with the Obama administration in DC. I was still making more than my sister, who was a teacher, had 9 years of experience, 2 master's degree and a specialist degree, making less than $48,000 a year in Mississippi.
Yeah.
You feel me?
Yeah.
And so when we're thinking about like all of the hats that folks wear, all of the responsibilities that they have, and like how even we in Seattle are still not where we need to be, it just begs the question. It's like, at some point, just like this economic crisis, something got to give.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We can't continue to keep using people like this.
I think this is a great conversation because it's providing insight to just how connected everything is.
Yep.
Right. Like one of my
Yep.
favorite shows is The Wire. I'm sure
Ooh,
y'all
come
seen
on.
it.
Season 3,
And,
man.
yeah. And it's like, I remember watching it, and every season it was just like a new season, and then it started to hit me. It was like, oh, they're kind of trying to paint a picture of how everything is connected.
Yeah.
You just don't know, right? So I say that to say, like, I do think there's opportunities to innovate education to where some of us in the community who have the ability and the capacity to be a third party resource for teachers or for the school system. I think it's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen, and there's many ways we can do it.
Absolutely.
I just think that's an avenue that we can definitely try to go down.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Now, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just because we're on the subject of like teachers, but I kind of wanted to ask like a more technical question.
Yeah,
like
please.
For aspiring teachers, like if they need advice on like, because I thought about it and I'm like, this must be incredibly tough, but like, what would be like your advice on how to build out like a curriculum for a whole school year?
Woo.
You know what I mean?
Man, absolutely. Yeah. So I would love to get into that. That's a conversation in and of itself. But I think the best thing, and this is like, advice that anybody could use, is just backward planning, right? Like sit down and envision, what do you want your student to end the school year with, right? What are the competencies you want them to have? What do you want them to believe about themselves? What do you want them to know about their history, X, Y, or Z? And then you look at, okay, in order for them to leave the year with these skills, I need to do this. But before that, I need to do this. And before that, I need to do this.
Yeah.
And keep that in reason. Do a perfect map for yourself, and then pare that down and work backward and actually think about like, okay, for me to get them here by day 1, by day 10, 100, 200, 180, what do I need to do to get them there?
Yeah.
And that's a very like high level answer. And we could like definitely drill down into the more technical expertise pieces of it, right? But at the essence of it, you have to begin with the end in mind. And really that end point is going to be so different for each child that like just teaching to the middle and building a curriculum, anybody can do that. Yeah. But like what you really want to be able to do is understand not necessarily the curriculum, but how a child develops and where each kid is at.
Yeah.
Because you'll build the understanding of the curriculum. That's technical expertise. But where the real magic in teaching is being able to take this technical expertise and augmenting it for 20 different kids at 20 different places all at the same time, right? So that's where I would just recommend is like, get to know a bunch of different kids, like do your teacher training programs or whatnot, understand like child development, and then layer in that curriculum in for whatever their needs might be. And that'll get you way farther than I think a lot of people would appreciate. Yeah.
I am curious, what are your thoughts, and if you guys probably haven't already been thinking about it or planning on it, of creating, because part of what my boy Khalil was talking about, where he said you have to be everything. One thing that stuck out to me was like you have to be a therapist for the kids alongside everything else that you're doing. What does it look like to kind of, and from current day, like what does it look like to support like students when it comes to mental health right now?
Yeah, man.
How can we do that in a, I guess, practical, efficient way to where they at least have resources?
Absolutely. I think like, because here's the man, here's the wild part about it. What do we mean when we say mental health? Like, what do we mean by that? Because like my fiance is a psychiatrist. She is finishing up medical school. She is like, expertly trained in the topic of mental health. And I think we do ourselves a vast disservice. It's the same reason why like I get so frustrated when I hear the word equity nowadays. You know what I'm saying? I think that's been the most perverted word in the English language in the past like 5-10 years. I think mental health is becoming that way too, because it's just in a lot of ways like people of color. That term, that doesn't do anything but serve the oppressor and make it easier for them to lump us all together. And so when we say mental health and lump it all together, we escape the responsibility of actually addressing it, because what you might be talking about is I need more therapists, I need more counselors. I can put all the therapists and counselors in the building as possible, but if they don't have cultural competencies, if they don't have the training that's necessary for that specific student population, that could very well do more harm, right? The presence of a person does not necessarily always lead to beneficial outcomes. And I actually have evidence from my own personal experience, given that it's anecdotal, that having nobody in some of these cases would have been better than having the person that we did serving in this role. You know what I'm saying?
That makes total sense. Wow. The fact that you brought that up is interesting, because so one thing that we actually have within our platform as an extended branch is we created a workshop back in 2019, which we consistently still do, called The World Is Yours. And it's a collaborative, informative workshop where it was initially for adults in the community, where we get creatives, entrepreneurs, professionals, get them in a room, and they get to express and have dialogue across industries and find mutual solutions around the obstacles they're all facing. So we took this same model and we tried it with the youth. We tried it at different high schools, and it was just like you could see the effect it had on them to just get a different resource. Like you said, sometimes it's not just bringing a therapist to come talk to them. It's like, bringing a third party that can serve their mental health in a different way. Maybe like getting them excited about things, or maybe pouring into them, or empowering them to speak life into the dreams and stuff that they want to work on, or they already are working on. So I just say that to say, I'm glad you brought up the fact that it's not like a monolith approach. It's like mental health can be addressed in so many different ways. And I think that's a conversation that needs to be had for sure.
Absolutely. And I think a big answer to that is like, how do we break down the barrier? And like going to your point about it all being interconnected, we need a single payer healthcare system. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do we break down the barriers? Because like student mental health is so wide. One person could be experiencing anxiety and depression, mental health issue. Another person could be experiencing undiagnosed ADHD, mental health issue. The support that we would give this person cannot be the same support that we give this person. So really what the answer is there is like, how do we have a healthcare system where everybody has access and you can just get what you need? You know what I'm saying? And by us having this conversation and like only like thinking that the solution is to provide what we understand at a surface level of like what benefits mental health. Okay, counselors, yes, sure, 100% agree. When done really well, counseling is great. However, what would be better is if we put our energy and efficacy into actually getting a healthcare system that benefits everybody, but especially children and especially Black and brown children and those who are furthest away from economic and educational justice, right? And build that system in their interest.
Yeah. That's real. Yep.
So, kind of want to ask a more personal question.
Yeah.
As far as like what was the path you took to become the president of the school board? You know what I mean? Like, what was that whole process?
Yeah. So that's wild. It's an interesting process. So there's only 7 of us. And so we essentially decide, after the elections happen every other year. So it's like a 2-year cycle before we have like a brand new board. But our appointments are 4. You decide who's going to be the president. And it's, there lots of different people bring lots of different things to the role, right? Yeah. And so thinking about, I got the opportunity in my 3 years as president to see, or rather in my 3 years on the board before stepping into the presidency, actually, how long was I on the board? Yes, we'll figure out the numbers later. I got to see 3 different presidents operate. Learned good things and bad things from all of them. We're all human, and I'm sure that future presidents will learn good things and bad things about me. But what I wanted to bring to this role and how I ascended here was A, bringing community along. Yeah. Right. B, keeping it a buck as much as I could. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then C, like, it's got to make sense. Like, policy has to make sense. Like, we have to be able to justify what we are doing and how we are utilizing community resources is actually getting outcomes for children. And I think a lot of the leadership that I brought with all of the accomplishments and advancements that I mentioned earlier, but also like from the perspective of having a vision for where we want to go, I just really am thankful that, being the youngest president to ever serve on the board, especially being the youngest Black man to serve as president on the board, and to be the only man serving on my board. You know what I'm saying? I take that super serious in terms of like, I want to make sure that I am empowering all of these incredibly intelligent women who have children in this system to lead. And that I am also not bringing all of the privilege that comes along with the biology that I was given at birth. You know what I'm saying? Especially as a young man. And so that's given me a really narrow tightrope to walk. And I feel as though I've done it effectively, and like I said, I'm always in the mindset of continuous improvement. But the pathway to get here has just been one of like building trust and relationships and like just showing people that like, no, like, I'm not in this for ascension. Like, I'm not looking for any other gig. Like, I just really want to be a good school board director because my mom and my daddy taught me that, like, community is important. You're supposed to give back. And I have a skill set and expertise that not a whole lot of folks in my community have, right? There was only one teacher on the board before I got on, and she was the one stepping down that I stepped into her place, All respect to my mentor and the giant that came before me, former school board president Betty Patu. Learned a lot from her and her family, watching how they move and operate in the community. And having an educator's perspective on the board that aligns with our strategic plan, there a lot of things just made sense. And I think the outcomes that we're seeing now, the fruits that we're harvesting are just proof that, when you put community in the driver's seat and you listen, great things are possible.
Yeah, bro. And salute to you for stepping, like I said in the intro, stepping in and stepping up because, again, I just think there's a conversation that also needs to be had about the generation such as ours that is coming and is here now.
Indeed.
And it's important that we step into different spaces that was once held by generations before us, whether it be, us in the media space, my brother here in the real estate space, people in the music space, whatever space you're in, understand like, somebody got to step up and you may not have it all figured out, but you got to have the bravery and the courage to know like, someone got to do it. And it should be more than one person doing it. Right. You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
Salute to you for first and foremost, just for, answering the call, you know what I mean?
Appreciate it, bro.
Now, man, this has been a very, very uplifting, insightful conversation, bro.
I'm glad.
A lot of gems, bro. Definitely. And but I am curious, kind of on a personal level, for you with all that you got going on, like how do you balance kind of like self-care and the work-life balance? Like what does that look like for you? I think it's different for everybody. We were just talking about vacations before the show started, but like what works for you? What works for Brandon Hersey?
Hey, what works for me? I mean, honestly, it's like being in love with a psychiatrist helps a lot. Whose daddy is a therapist, so you know, I get free mental health support at my crib, which is critical for a role like this, right? But I mean, I think that what really fills me up is I'm an extrovert through and through. Like people, conversating with people, getting to know people, like maintaining deep relationships with my friends and community. That's what really gives me life and keeps me going. And whether it just be, you know, we're talking about, you know, space, aliens, Dragon Ball Z, whatever the case may be, you know, just though being in a space to where my relationships are generative is really important to me. And that's what like gives me a lot of like, that's how I care for myself. The other thing is that like, I am very unapologetic about my time. You know what I'm saying? Like I will give and folks who are, you know, who have interacted with me, who might be listening to this know, like through the week, I'm gonna pick up the phone 10 p.m. Hey, what's up? You know, what's popping? What do you need? What's going down? But when I say that, like I'm taking time for me, I got to, man, because it's like, I'm such a workaholic that like, I'll run myself into the ground. We were in Cancun and I had a work call come in and I was like about to go get on the jet ski and I was like, oh dang, I got to go take this. And my fiance actually looked at me sideways. It's like, are you serious? I'm on the beach and my Apple Watch is buzzing. It's like, oh, I got to go take this. But that's it, man. It's just like being really, you know, taking care of yourself, knowing what your boundaries are. But the way that I justify that is that like when I'm here, I'm going hard. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
No, that's good. I just like to ask that question to guests because
it's important.
With people who are, you know, being called to do so much, it's like, I think we redefine what that looks like. You know, just the same way we reinvent ourselves, we may be coming into new levels of our paths and careers. You got to redefine what you need in those different spaces. So
definitely.
That's good, brother. Man, you got anything that you want to wrap up with? I mean,
I guess for you, like, what was it like teaching K through 12,
bro?
Because I know it's like, because I taught 5th graders for like 4 weeks.
There you go.
Nesby. And I was just one grade.
I did not know this, by the way. Oh, Nesby.
In Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So, and so I feel you. I only had them for 4 weeks.
Brooklyn.
I was like, man, these are my kids.
I did mine.
You know,
5th graders in Brooklyn.
I did mine in Oakland.
All black kids too.
I was in Oakland with mine.
Yeah. So it's crazy. So some of the stuff you're saying, I'm like, man, if I had them for a whole school year, like the attachment would have been crazy.
It's crazy.
Like I said, it was just one grade. So for you, you had this wide variety. You know what I'm saying? So
more or less. So like I have the benefit of like as a school board president, like being able to influence policy on like those multiple grades. But for me, I only taught one grade for all the 5 years that I was in the classroom. But that one grade, I wanted nothing to do with at first, right? So like when I came into it, I wanted to be like my mama. I wanted to teach government. I wanted to teach history. I wanted to teach high school, Dead Poet Society up on the table, all that nonsense. And I quickly realized that, nah, I'm good on that. And one of my mentors was like, well, have you considered like elementary? And I was like, no, not really. I'm not trying to like, you know, wipe anybody's nose, clean up, throw up. Took a chance on it, taught 2nd grade, loved every minute of it. Can't wait to get back. The reason that I love 2nd grade is that the amount of growth that happens in that grade band alone, like we get kids coming in as like 6-year-olds, right? And they leave at 8. When you come into 2nd grade, most kids can write maybe 1 or 2 sentences and you leave being able to like write 3 to 5 paragraph essays with opinions and stuff, you know? And so that ramp up is just intense. And like, that's what I like. I like the intensity of the ramp up. And I think that like specifically for like 7 and 8-year-olds, they're at that age where everything is still magic, right? Before they get cell phones, before they end up in 3rd grade, 5th grade, all that kind of stuff. And they really feel like what the world is. I feel like if you can have an influence on a kid's like worldview at that point, it's a really powerful thing if done positively, you know? So that's what kept me coming back.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
So, all right, another question.
Yeah, shoot.
I always think about this is like, man, I wonder what school would be like if I was in school today. Like, you know what I mean? So like, I guess what are the comparisons and
it's
similarities?
Different.
You know what I mean?
It's different, right? And like, here's the thing. You look like a young cat. I'm assuming that you were in school in some capacity in the 90s, right? Maybe 80s, something like that. Everybody had like a profession that they wanted to be, right? Oh, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a football player. I want to be doctor, lawyer. Everybody wants to be an influencer now.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be a TikToker. Everybody wants to be a YouTuber. That's a huge problem. And I feel like the creativity in this generation has taken a far plummet, right?
Yeah.
Like I told y'all at the beginning, like I was a little artist. I love drawing, all that kind of stuff. All of my friends did too. Everybody was like, because you had to make it up, right? You had to go out and figure out like, oh, I'm going to use my imagination. Because we have cell phones and tablets and all these things and screen time, X, Y, and Z, we take the opportunity to develop imagination and creativity away from children in exchange for stimulus, right? And the problem with that is that we cannot all be salesmen. We cannot all be influencers.
That's real.
And if we only have folks that are interested in marketing going into higher education in the workforce, it's going to be oversaturated, and we're going to have a really disengaged generation, which is what I'm terrified of.
Yeah.
Because no one's going to want the real skill set as opposed to being the person who's selling the object, you know?
Yeah.
So that's scary. That's the biggest difference, I'd say.
I just say that because, like, I couldn't even imagine having a phone. Like, in fifth grade, like, you know what I mean? Like, I had to wait till like high school, and at that, it was like a flip phone. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like, technology wasn't as advanced, obviously. So,
bro, can I share just like one little detail with you? You know them like flash drives that you used to get to like put your papers and stuff on? Man, guess how much storage my first flash drive had? And I thought that I was a king of the world. 32 megabytes.
Oh my god!
And that was like a $40 flash drive. You know what I'm saying? And now kids are walking around with tablets that got terabytes and stuff in them. You know, it's crazy.
They don't need all that, man.
Man, what you doing with that?
Hey, someone got to say they don't need all that stuff.
Man,
I'm all for the advancement of technology.
Yes.
You know, I got a theory about technology advancement. I do think it's kind of devolving us.
Yes.
As much as people think it's evolving us, but that's a whole nother podcast. But y'all started somewhere.
I just wanted to touch on that, guy. You know,
great questions.
I had to.
Great questions.
Yeah, Brandon, man, we just appreciate you for being here first and foremost.
Thank you for the invitation.
Taking the time. You definitely been sharing a lot of valuable information and just, wisdom, from your experiences. But before we get you out of here, definitely want to ask, what excites you for the future? And whether near, long term, like what are some things that when you just look out, when you gaze out, what is it? What excites you?
I want to be really thoughtful about this. So give me just a second.
You're good.
No problem.
Future's bright.
It's bright, man. There's so many ways that we can go. What excites me about the future is how particularly like Gen Z is just like through with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I say that in the same tongue as saying like, oh, everybody wants to be influencers, but really engaging with kids who are in their teens right now and the conversations and the emotional empathy and intelligence that they possess is light years above where I was at that age.
Oh,
I was still very much so a child, right? And so when you think, and I used to tell this to folks all the time, like when I started teaching, all of my kids were 8. The only president they had ever known was a black man. Like there's just so much context. I don't care where you're from. That builds really strong context to see what people could and could not be. I think seeing that swing to the presidency that we had previously has really forced so many kids in so many places, not to mention the pandemic, the financial crisis, all this, that, and the other, has really forced them to develop an emotional intelligence that is well beyond their years, right? And so what excites me and what gives me hope for the future is that like those are eventually when the boomers decide that like, yo, I've had enough, right? I'm really excited for Gen Z, even more so than millennials. Speaking as a proud millennial, I just learned that I'm like chuggy like a year ago. I don't know if y'all have heard that word. I'm more excited for like millennials to just kind of get out the way too, because like the young kids, the Gen Z kids that are running in a lot of places across the country, they're bringing the fire in a really significant way. That's really exciting, right? And a lot of it is like far left, and I'm down with it. You know what I'm saying? But it's like the fact that they're having those conversations and they have the courage to do that. And regardless of where you're growing up, almost all children under the age of 24 accept that climate change is a thing, right? Almost all, children under the age of 24 except that like this country is built on really oppressive like systems that hold black and brown people down, right?
Very transparent,
and will be quick to hold you accountable, right? So I think that there's somewhere in the middle between like cancel culture and like comfort culture, right? I think in many ways we've swung far past and now we're coming back to the middle, but I'm not one to like really try to like put cancel culture down, right? Because that's oppression of freedom of speech at its finest. You know what I'm saying? No, and so like we need to be holding each other accountable.
That's what I get from it. They call it cancel culture, right? But a lot of times it's accountability, and when you're being accountable, then you got to be intentional about what you're being accountable about. You can't just cancel people. Like be specific about why you're trying to hold someone accountable, because a lot of times if accountability means you care, and if you care, you're gonna have specifics on why you want to hold someone accountable. Not just cancel them because you hate their song and in their song they said something.
That's it.
Or or they tweeted something in 2009 and now you're like, I don't know.
That's it.
That's how it is nowadays. But okay, no, it's exciting stuff. I like how you describe that. Okay, last question for you, brother, before we get you out of here. Let's get it. We ask every guest this question. So if you can, what's one word to describe what keeps you on the up and up and why?
Inspiration. Inspiration. I do a lot of like self-reflecting and like, trying to really, I really want to do the work of like, I can't even get the words out. Like I care a lot about how I show up for other people. And I found that like when I am inspired, I show up for people like as the best version of myself. And so that's what I like. And the way that I become inspired is I try to stay well-read. I try to stay knowledgeable. I try to stay up as much as I can. And like finding new ways to innovate, new connections to make, that's what keeps me inspired. And that's what helps me show up as much as I can, as much as I do for my community, right? So specifically on the up and up, inspiration is the word for me.
I love it.
Yeah, man.
I love it. That's a great word.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of inspiration, if you've listened, watched, or whatever, consumed this episode and you're not inspired, you're tripping.
Hey.
Run it back. Run it back for sure. But Brandon, man, again, we want to thank you for being much here. Love. We wish you much success moving forward with everything you got going on, everything you're going to do. This will not be the last time we connect because we got some things we could definitely connect on.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, man, you got success. You got support with us here at the Up and Up always. And with that being said, it's safe to say Brandon Hersey is officially a member of the Up and Up. Can we get around here?
Yeah. I graduated.
Come on. Let's appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much, bro.
Seriously. Great questions, man.
To continue supporting the podcast and the entire Up and Up movement, be sure to rate, review, like, and subscribe.
As well as follow us @_the Up and Up on all social media platforms to stay connected with everything the Up and Up has coming your way.
Thanks for listening, and until the next one,
keep it on the Up and Up.